My name is Sammy Holbrook, 67 years old, and I never thought I would be thrown out onto the street like yesterday's garbage by my own daughter-in-law. After 40 years of building a successful business and raising my son alone, I found myself homeless the day after his funeral. As Jennifer smirked while changing the locks, she had no idea what was coming at the will reading. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join our community of life stories. I guess my story really begins back in 1976, when I returned from Vietnam with nothing but nightmares and $20 in my pocket. Most guys came home to loving families, but both my parents had passed while I was overseas, leaving me truly alone in the world. I remember standing at their graves, promising I would make something of myself despite the circumstances. With no college education, and the country not exactly rolling out the red carpet for returning vets, I took the only thing I had, my 2 hands and knowledge of construction I'd gained in the Corps, and started taking odd jobs. First, it was simple repairs for elderly folks in my neighborhood, then small renovation projects. By 1980, I had 3 employees and a small but growing reputation for honest work at fair prices. That same year, I met Marie. She was the secretary at a lumber supplier I frequented, with auburn hair and the kind of smile that made you forget whatever troubles you carried. We married 6 months after our first date. When you know, you know. Marie became my rock, my reason for pushing the business forward. We saved every penny, lived in a tiny apartment, and poured everything into growing Holbrook construction. David came along in 1982, the spitting image of his mother with my stubborn chin. I still remember holding him that first time, this tiny human completely dependent on me, and feeling terrified and exhilarated all at once. Marie and I promised each other we would give him everything we never had: stability, education, and unconditional love. By the time David turned 6, the business had grown to 30 employees, and we finally moved into our first real home. Nothing fancy, but a solid 4-bedroom in a good school district with a yard where David could play. Life seemed perfect, everything I had worked for falling into place. Then Marie started getting headaches. At first, we dismissed them as stress or needing new glasses. By the time doctors found the brain tumor, it was already stage 4. She fought hard, my Marie, never complaining, even on her worst days. She made me promise to raise David with enough love for 2 parents. 8 months after diagnosis, I became a widower and single father to an 8-year-old boy who couldn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. Those first years alone with David tested everything in me. Running a growing business while being there for school pickups, soccer games, and helping with homework nearly broke me. I turned down dates and social invitations. My employees stepped up in ways I could never repay, covering for me when David had fevers or school events. The business survived, but grew more slowly. I didn't care. David needed me more than I needed success. The teenage years brought their own challenges. David missed having a mother during those awkward times, when a boy needs maternal guidance. I did my best, reading parenting books late into the night after he went to bed. We fought sometimes, what father and son don't, but we always ended the day on good terms, our special handshake from his childhood. Still, our way of saying we're okay without words. David grew into a fine young man, studying business at State University, before joining me at Holbrook Construction. By then, we had over 100 employees and projects across 3 states. Having him work alongside me was the proudest moment of my life. Seeing my son, who had Marie's compassion and my determination, ready to eventually take over what I had built. At a Chamber of Commerce function in 2017, David met Jennifer Taylor. She worked for a high-end real estate firm that catered to wealthy clients, with expensive taste and ambition written all over her. I noticed how her eyes lit up when David mentioned the family business, how she subtly steered conversation toward revenue and growth projections rather than getting to know him as a person. "She seems nice," I told David afterwards, not wanting to dampen his obvious enthusiasm. But something felt off. Jennifer was beautiful, no doubt, tall, blonde, always impeccably dressed. But at 32, she was 4 years older than David and had the calculated poise of someone who always knew exactly what they wanted. Nice? Dad, she's amazing, David said, already smitten. Did you know she sold $3 million properties last month alone? I tried raising gentle concerns as their relationship progressed at lightning speed. You sure you're not rushing things, son? You've only known her 6 months, I ventured when he showed me the engagement ring he'd purchased. A diamond so large it would have made Marie uncomfortable. When you know, David replied, throwing my own words about Marie back at me. Besides, I'm 31, Dad, not getting any younger. The wedding Jennifer planned was exactly what I had expected. Lavish, over the top, with 400 guests, many of whom David had never met. I wrote the checks without complaint, wanting my son's happiness above all else. During the father-son dance, David whispered, "Mom would have loved today, wouldn't she?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, though truthfully Marie would have found the whole spectacle unnecessary. After a 3-week honeymoon in Europe, Jennifer suggested they move into my house temporarily to save money for their dream home. My place, originally purchased as an investment property 15 years earlier, had grown valuable with the neighborhood. 5 bedrooms, a pool, and a separate guest house, where I had been living since David graduated college. We'll save on rent, and you won't be rattling around alone in that big house, Jennifer said with practiced concern at Sunday dinner. It makes perfect financial sense. David looked hopeful, and I couldn't refuse them. Within a month, Jennifer had redecorated the main house, replacing family photos with abstract art and the comfortable furniture Marie and I had chosen with sleek, modern pieces that looked good but hurt my back. The changes in the house were nothing compared to the changes in Jennifer once the marriage certificate was signed. The warmth she had shown during their courtship cooled considerably, especially toward me. Family dinners became rare, replaced by her girls' nights and charity events. When I did see her, conversations were perfunctory, her attention on her phone rather than anything I might say. David worked longer hours to maintain the lifestyle Jennifer expected. Luxury cars, designer clothes, memberships at the country club. I watched my son transform from a balanced, happy man to someone constantly checking his phone for messages from Jennifer, afraid to disappoint her with a late arrival home or a business setback. "She's just ambitious, Dad," he would say, when I carefully broached the subject. "She pushes me to be better." But the light in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a constant low-grade anxiety I had never seen before. Still, his loyalty to Jennifer was absolute, and I respected his choice, even as I worried about the toll it was taking on him. The change in our relationship hurt most of all. Where once we had talked freely about everything, now conversations seemed guarded, with David constantly glancing at his watch or phone. Our standing Thursday lunch tradition became sporadic, then stopped altogether when Jennifer scheduled regular spa appointments that couldn't possibly be changed during that time slot. I retreated more to the guest house, giving them space, while remaining available whenever David sought me out. I focused on the business, expanded our charitable foundation in Marie's memory, and told myself that all marriages go through adjustments. If Jennifer made my son happy, that was all that mattered, even if I rarely saw evidence of that happiness anymore. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt from a clear blue sky. David had been having headaches for months, but dismissed them as stress, just as Marie had done all those years ago. When he finally went for a checkup at my insistence, the MRI revealed an aggressive glioblastoma, the same type of brain tumor that had taken his mother. The doctor's words washed over me in waves of disbelief. Advanced stage, difficult location, 6 to 12 months, with treatment. I gripped David's hand as his face went pale, history repeating itself in the cruelest way possible. "We'll fight this," I promised him, my voice steadier than I felt. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs. We'll get second opinions, try experimental treatments, anything." Jennifer was shopping when we called with the news. She arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, eyes red, but makeup perfect. She collapsed dramatically into David's arms, her sobs echoing through the consultation room. "What will we do? How will we manage?" she kept asking, until a nurse gently reminded her that David was the patient who needed comforting. The next day, I temporarily stepped back from active management of the company, putting Marcus, my longtime business partner, in charge of daily operations. "Take as long as you need," he insisted. "David comes first." We consulted specialists across the country, flying to appointments in Houston, Boston, and San Francisco. Money was no object. I would have spent every penny I had for a miracle. But the prognosis remained grim, the tumor's location making it inoperable without catastrophic damage to cognitive function. Quality of life over quantity. David finally decided after a particularly grueling round of experimental treatment left him unable to get out of bed for days. I want whatever time I have left to mean something. While I focused entirely on David's care and comfort, Jennifer's behavior began to shift. The initial shock and grief gave way to something more calculating. She spent less time at David's bedside and more time on the phone in hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when anyone approached. One evening, as David slept after a difficult day of treatment, I overheard Jennifer in the hallway. "Once he's gone, we'll have to move quickly with the transfers. Yes, I know the old man will be a problem, but David trusts me to handle everything. No, he doesn't suspect anything." When she spotted me, she smoothly transitioned to talking about funeral flower arrangements. But the damage was done. I said nothing to David, unwilling to add to his burdens, but I began watching Jennifer more carefully. She scheduled meetings with financial advisors without me, claiming they were too emotional for me to handle. She began asking David to sign documents while he was medicated, claiming they were routine insurance papers that couldn't wait. Despite the growing tension with Jennifer, those months held precious moments with my son. We talked late into the night about his childhood, his memories of Marie, his hopes and regrets. He worried about the business, about the employees who depended on us for their livelihoods. "Promise me you'll look after everyone, Dad," he made me swear. "And Jennifer, too. She'll be lost without me." "I promise," I told him, though doubts about Jennifer's need for anyone's care were growing daily. As his condition deteriorated, David began having secretive meetings with James Wilson, our family attorney, insisting on privacy, even from me. "Just making sure everything's in order," he would say with a weak smile when I questioned him. "Don't worry so much, Dad." But I did worry, especially when I noticed David's wedding ring missing one day. When asked, he simply said, "Jennifer's having it cleaned," but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. In his final weeks, David could no longer hide his concerns about Jennifer. "I think I made a mistake, Dad," he whispered one night when we thought he was sleeping. "Not with the marriage, but with trust. I need to fix things while I still can." The next day, he asked me to bring James for another private meeting. They spoke for 2 hours, with occasional raised voices from the attorney. When James left, he gave me a solemn nod, but refused to discuss what had transpired. David's decline accelerated after that. The hospice nurse warned me he likely had days, not weeks. I barely left his side, sleeping in the recliner beside his bed, holding his hand through pain episodes, reading aloud from his favorite childhood books when he was too weak to talk. Jennifer made appearances, always when other people were present, playing the devoted wife perfectly. But her overnight stays became rare, always with excuses about needing proper rest or important errands. The hospice staff exchanged knowing looks, but remained professionally silent. On April 12th, David's breathing changed, in the way the hospice nurse had warned, indicated the end was near. I called Jennifer immediately. "He's slipping away. You need to come now." "I'll be there as soon as I can," she promised. But there was a strange echo on the line, like she was in a large space rather than at home, as she claimed. I sat with David, holding his hand, telling him how proud I was, how much I loved him, how his mother was waiting to welcome him. His breathing grew more labored. Then suddenly, he opened his eyes with unexpected clarity. "Dad," he whispered. The blue box in my office safe. Remember that. And know that I love you. You were always enough. Those were his last words. My son, my only child, slipped away at 3:17 in the afternoon, with only me by his side. I sat there holding his hand for almost an hour, unable to let go, tears flowing freely as I remembered the baby he had been, the child he was, and the man he had become. Jennifer arrived at 4:30, her black dress unwrinkled, her mascara suspiciously perfect for someone who claimed to have been crying since my call. She threw herself across David's body with loud sobs while the nurse watched with narrowed eyes. When the funeral home came to take his body, Jennifer was already on the phone with her mother, discussing service arrangements. The funeral was everything Jennifer wanted. Elaborate, expensive, with hundreds of guests. She stood receiving condolences like a queen holding court, accepting embraces with practiced grace. I delivered a eulogy that left few dry eyes, sharing stories of David's kindness, his humor, his dedication to family and community. Jennifer's brief speech focused oddly on how much David had provided for her and how difficult life would be without him. As the last mourners left the reception at our home, I felt the weight of loss pressing down like a physical thing. David was gone, just like Marie, leaving me alone once more. But I still had promises to keep, to the business, to our employees, and yes, even to Jennifer. Little did I know how quickly those promises would be tested. The morning after the funeral, I woke to the sound of voices in the main house. Still exhausted from grief and the emotional toll of the previous day, I threw on clothes and made my way from the guest house to investigate. In the living room, I found Jennifer sitting with her parents and a man in a suit I didn't recognize. "Ah, Sammy, good of you to join us," Jennifer said, her tone suddenly formal and cold. Gone was any pretense of grief or warmth. She gestured to an empty chair across from them. "We need to talk about arrangements going forward." "Arrangements?" I asked, still foggy with sleep and sorrow. "Yes. Now that David is gone, there need to be some changes," she continued, her voice businesslike. "This is Graham Peterson, my personal attorney." The man nodded curtly, but didn't offer his hand. "As you know, David and I own this house jointly," Jennifer continued, though this was news to me. "With his passing, full ownership transfers to me. I've decided I need a fresh start, away from painful reminders of what I've lost." I struggled to follow her meaning, my grief-clouded mind working slowly. "What are you saying, Jennifer?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm saying that I need you to move out, Sammy. Permanently. David and I discussed this before he passed. He wanted me to be able to move forward without complications." The words hit me like physical blows. "That's not possible. David would never." "David told me many things in private," she cut in sharply. "Things about how he felt smothered by your constant presence, how he wanted us to have our own life without you always hovering. He was just too kind to tell you directly." I looked to her parents, expecting some intervention, some recognition of how inappropriate this conversation was, barely 24 hours after burying my son. Mrs. Taylor studied her manicure, while Mr. Siv for hive. Taylor stared uncomfortably at the floor. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "we're all grieving. This isn't the time for major decisions. Let's give it a few weeks." "I've already decided," she interrupted. "My attorney has prepared the necessary paperwork. You have 3 days to remove your belongings from the guest house and property." 3 days? I echoed, disbelief turning to anger. "I built this house. I've lived here for 15 years. Everything I own is here. My son just died, which is precisely why I need space." Jennifer countered smoothly. "Your presence is a constant reminder of my loss. David would want me to heal, not wallow in grief." I appealed directly to her parents. "Surely you can see how wrong this is?" Mrs. Taylor finally spoke. "Jennifer needs to process her grief in her own way, Sammy. David would want what's best for his wife." "I promised David I would look after her," I said, my voice breaking. Jennifer's laugh was brittle. David's dead, so promises don't matter anymore. And let's be honest, Sammy, at your age, you should be thinking about retirement homes anyway. The cruelty of her words left me speechless. This woman, who had shared our home, who had claimed to love my son, was now treating me like an unwanted pest rather than family. I won't leave, I said finally. This isn't what David would want. Jennifer's eyes hardened. You don't have a choice. The property is legally mine now. If you're not gone in 3 days, I'll have you removed for trespassing. I spent that day in a daze, wandering through the guest house looking at decades of accumulated memories. Photos of David growing up, Marie's favorite books I'd kept all these years, awards from the business. How could I possibly sort through everything in 3 days? I called Marcus, who was outraged on my behalf. She can't do this, Sammy. We'll fight it. I don't have the energy to fight right now, I admitted. Maybe a hotel for a few weeks until I figure things out. The next morning, I drove to the grocery store to pick up some boxes. When I returned an hour later, I found the locks on both the main house and guest house changed. Jennifer watched from an upstairs window as I discovered I could no longer enter my own home. On the front lawn sat 8 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases, apparently Jennifer's idea of my belongings. 40 years of life reduced to a pathetic pile on the grass for all the neighbors to see. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, pounded on the door, but Jennifer refused to answer. Through the window, I could see her calmly talking on the phone, deliberately ignoring me. Harold Bennett from next door came over, concern evident on his face. Sammy, what's going on? Can I help? The humiliation of having to explain my situation overwhelmed me. Jennifer's kicked me out, changed the locks. 15 years in this house, and I can't even get my own things. Harold's face darkened with anger. That's not right. You want me to call the police? And tell them what? That my daughter-in-law is being cruel? That's not illegal, just immoral. I began loading the boxes into my car, wondering what essential items Jennifer had deemed unimportant enough to discard. As I lifted the last box, a sharp pain shot through my chest. The edges of my vision darkened, and I felt myself falling. Harold's voice seemed to come from very far away, calling my name, then calling for help. I woke in the hospital, monitors beeping steadily beside me. A doctor explained I'd experienced a stress-induced cardiac event, not a full heart attack, but a warning sign. You need to avoid extreme stress, Mr. Holbrook. Your heart can't take it. Harold had called an ambulance and stayed with me until I was stable. He offered his spare room, but I couldn't impose. Instead, I checked into the Riverview Motel, a budget place on the edge of town, where 20 years earlier Holbrook Construction had renovated the roof after a storm. The manager, Thomas, recognized me immediately. Mr. Holbrook, what brings you here? I gave him a simplified version of events, too exhausted for details. His face showed the same mixture of shock and sympathy I'd seen on Harold's. The weekly rate is usually $350, he said. But for you, $275, and I'll put you in the corner unit with the kitchenette, no extra charge. My attempts to contact Jennifer over the next few days were met with silence. Then a text message from her attorney, threatening a restraining order if I continued to harass his client. When I tried to access my bank accounts, I discovered the passwords had been changed. My business email suddenly showed access denied. Within a week, I began hearing disturbing reports from friends. Jennifer was telling people I had become unstable after David's death, that I had been financially abusing David for years, draining company resources. Some even whispered I had gambling debts that had nearly bankrupted the family business, and that David had confided his fears about my mental state to Jennifer before his death. Former friends crossed the street to avoid me. Business associates who had attended David's funeral suddenly couldn't take my calls. The community I had been part of for decades was pulling away, believing Jennifer's lies because she was the grieving widow, while I was just the troublesome old father-in-law. Only a handful of people stood by me. Harold brought home cooked meals to the motel and offered his unwavering support. Marcus kept me updated on company matters, though he admitted being blocked from certain accounts. Patricia, David's godmother and Marie's best friend, visited regularly, bringing coffee and her no-nonsense attitude. Jennifer's been telling everyone you gambled away money meant for David's treatment, Patricia informed me during one visit, as if you wouldn't have sold your soul to save him. Marcus brought more concerning news. Someone's been transferring funds from the main company accounts to subsidiaries I don't recognize. Large amounts. I've tried to stop it, but I don't have full authorization anymore. I sank deeper into depression, the combined weight of grief and betrayal nearly unbearable. The only thing keeping me going was my promise to David. I would sort this out, somehow, for his sake. 2 weeks after my eviction, I received an official letter from James Wilson's law office, notifying me of a will reading scheduled for the following Monday. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Please attend, Sammy. Important. That same day, Jennifer sent me a text. Don't bother coming to the will reading. You'll just embarrass yourself. There's nothing for you. Her message, intended to discourage me, had the opposite effect. Something in her desperation to keep me away stirred my suspicion. I would attend, if only to honor David one last time. I reached out to Frank Donovan, an old military buddy who had become a private investigator. I need information on Jennifer Holbrook, I told him. Something doesn't add up. While waiting for Frank's findings, I tried to prepare myself mentally for the will reading. Patricia helped me select a decent outfit from my limited wardrobe, ironing my one good shirt and polishing my shoes. You stand tall in there, she instructed me. Whatever Jennifer's done, David loved you. Remember that. The night before the reading, sorting through one of the boxes Jennifer had thrown out, I found a childhood drawing from David, a stick figure of a man wearing what appeared to be a cape with the words, Dad, my hero scrawled in a child's handwriting. I clutched it to my chest, and for the first time since his death, allowed myself to really cry. For my son, for the life we had shared, and for the future that had been stolen from both of us. The weeks following my eviction were the darkest of my life. Grief over David combined with the shock of Jennifer's betrayal left me barely functioning. I spent days in the motel room, venturing out only when necessary, avoiding the pitying or suspicious glances of people who had once greeted me warmly. My financial situation grew increasingly dire. Unable to access my regular accounts, I relied on a single credit card that thankfully Jennifer didn't know about. I calculated I had perhaps 2 months before reaching the limit, assuming I continued living at the motel and eating as cheaply as possible. Thomas, the motel manager, became an unexpected ally. When he found me attempting to wash clothes in the bathroom sink, he quietly provided access to the staff laundry facilities. My father was treated badly by his second wife after my mother died. He explained simply, I know how family can sometimes be the cruelest. My attempts to resolve the financial situation hit wall after wall. The bank required David's death certificate and multiple forms of identification, which were in the house I could no longer access. When I finally gathered the necessary documentation, I was told there was a legal hold on the accounts pending estate settlement. Jennifer's campaign to discredit me continued spreading through the community. Friends who had known me for decades now viewed me with suspicion. I overheard whispers at the diner, where I occasionally splurged on breakfast. Gambling problems. Poor Jennifer. David was supporting him for years. The isolation was nearly as painful as the grief. As a widower, I had experienced loneliness before, but never this sense of being actively shunned by a community I had helped build. Holbrook Construction had renovated the library, donated to the high school athletic facilities, sponsored Little League teams for 20 years. Yet now people acted as if I were a stranger with a questionable past. Harold remained steadfast, stopping by the motel every other day with food or simply company. This will pass, he assured me. Truth always comes out eventually. Patricia was even more direct in her support. Jennifer's spinning quite the tale around town, she reported during one visit. According to her latest version, you were dipping into David's medical fund to support a girlfriend in Florida, as if you've looked at another woman since Marie. The absurdity would have been laughable if it weren't so damaging. Why do people believe her? I asked Patricia. I've lived here my entire adult life. People love scandal, she replied bluntly. And Jennifer plays the grieving widow perfectly. Plus, she's donating to all the right charities, hosting fundraisers in David's name. Image Management 101. Marcus brought increasingly concerning reports about the company. Accounts are being systematically drained, he told me, during a furtive meeting at a coffee shop 2 towns over, where we wouldn't be recognized. She's claiming David gave her power of attorney during his illness. The documentation looks legitimate, but something feels off. Can we challenge it legally? I asked. Marcus shook his head. Not without significant legal funds, which she's made sure you can't access. It's brilliantly orchestrated, Sammy. She must have been planning this for months. The realization that Jennifer's betrayal had begun while David was still alive, that she had been positioning herself while my son fought for his life, rekindled a spark of anger within me. That spark became my lifeline, a tiny flame of purpose in the darkness of depression. I thought constantly of David's final coherent words to me. The blue box in my office safe. What blue box? What was in his office safe? These questions circled in my mind as I tried to piece together what David might have discovered about Jennifer before his death. Frank Donovan called 3 days after I had contacted him. I've got something you should see, he said, his voice grim. Can you meet tomorrow? We met at a truck stop restaurant off the highway. Frank slid a manila envelope across the table. It's not pretty, he warned. Inside were surveillance photos of Jennifer with a man I didn't recognize, dining at expensive restaurants, entering a hotel, embracing intimately. The timestamps shocked me most. These weren't recent photos of a widow seeking comfort. These dated back to before David's diagnosis, continuing through his treatment. Who is he? I asked, my hands shaking with anger. Ryan Mercer, Frank replied. Investment banker. They've known each other since before Jennifer met David. From what my sources tell me, they never really ended things, even after she married your son. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. Not just financial manipulation, but infidelity throughout the marriage, even during David's illness. I remembered the times Jennifer claimed to be too exhausted to sit with David during treatments, the mysterious shopping trips that yielded no packages, the girls' nights that left her returning home in the early hours. There's more, Frank continued, pulling out financial records. Mercer and Jennifer have a joint account established 18 months ago. Large sums have been transferred there recently from accounts I believe belong to your company. The evidence was damning, but I wasn't sure how to use it. Without legal standing or financial resources, what could I do? Still, knowledge was power, and for the first time since David's death, I felt a glimmer of hope that Jennifer's schemes might eventually be exposed. As the will reading approached, I focused on preparing myself emotionally for what would likely be another humiliation. Jennifer had made it clear she expected me to receive nothing, and given her manipulations, she had probably ensured that outcome. Yet something nagged at me. Why had James Wilson, the family attorney, personally encouraged me to attend? James had been our lawyer for over 20 years, handling everything from business contracts to personal matters. He was professionally reserved, but had always shown genuine respect for me. His handwritten note suggested he knew something important. The night before the reading, I could barely sleep, my mind racing with questions. What was in the blue box David mentioned? Why had he been meeting privately with James? What had he discovered about Jennifer that prompted him to say he had made a mistake about trust? I rose early, showered carefully in the motel's temperamental bathroom, and put on the clothes Patricia had helped prepare. My navy suit, pressed white shirt, and the tie David had given me for Christmas 3 years earlier. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. In just weeks, grief had etched new lines in my face, and I had lost enough weight that my clothes hung loosely. Stand tall, I told my reflection, echoing Patricia's words. For David, Harold insisted on driving me to the attorney's office. You shouldn't face this alone, he said firmly. Marcus and Patricia are meeting us there. As we pulled into the parking lot of the professional building housing James Wilson's law firm, I spotted Jennifer arriving in David's Range Rover. She was dressed impeccably in designer black, playing the part of grieving widow to perfection. Beside her walked her parents and several friends who had once been mine as well. Ryan Mercer was noticeably absent, keeping their relationship discreet, no doubt. Harold squeezed my shoulder. Remember, whatever happens in there, you have people who know the truth. That's what matters in the end. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car to face whatever was coming next, clinging to the hope that somehow, somewhere, my son had found a way to set things right. The conference room at Wilson Legal Partners felt unnaturally quiet as people took their seats. Jennifer had positioned herself at the head of the oval table, her parents flanking her like protective sentinels. She acknowledged my arrival with the barest nod before turning to whisper something to her mother that made them both glance my way and smirk. I took a seat near the door, grateful when Marcus, Patricia, and Harold arranged themselves around me in a show of solidarity. The contrast between our small group and Jennifer's entourage of supporters was striking and obviously intentional, a visual representation of the community division she had engineered. James Wilson entered precisely at 10, accompanied by his assistant carrying several folders. He was a tall, austere man in his 60s, with a reputation for meticulous attention to detail and unwavering ethical standards. His expression revealed nothing as he took his position at the table. "Thank you all for coming today," he began formally. "We are here to execute the last will and testament of David Michael Holbrook. Before we begin, I must state that what transpires in this room is legally binding and has been prepared according to Mr. Holbrook's explicit instructions." Jennifer straightened in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Her confidence was palpable, her victory seemingly assured. James began reading the standard legal preamble, then moved on to specific bequests. Small items went to various friends, his vintage watch collection to Marcus, his signed baseball memorabilia to his college roommate, charitable donations to causes he had supported. As these minor items were distributed, Jennifer's smile grew increasingly smug. When James finally reached the major assets, she visibly preened. "To my wife, Jennifer Ann Holbrook, I leave our primary residence at 812 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and vehicles registered in our joint names." Jennifer shot me a triumphant look across the table. "Additionally," James continued, "I leave to Jennifer Ann Holbrook my personal investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $1.2 million and my 51% ownership stake in Holbrook Properties, LLC. One of Jennifer's friends reached over to squeeze her hand in congratulation. Her mother dabbed at non-existent tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. I sat very still, feeling strangely calm. I had expected this, had prepared myself for it. The house and investments were substantial, but they weren't what mattered most to me. I had lost my son. Material possessions seemed trivial by comparison. James paused, taking a sip of water before looking directly at me for the first time. "That concludes the standard distributions as outlined in the main document of the will dated January 15 of this year." Jennifer rose slightly from her chair. "Thank you, James. If that's all, we can—" "Please be seated, Mrs. Holbrook," James interrupted, his tone suddenly firmer. "There is a final section of the will that must be addressed." Jennifer frowned, clearly confused. "What final section?" "David and I reviewed everything with Graham." She gestured toward her personal attorney. "This addendum was added on March 27th of this year, witnessed by myself and 2 partners of this firm," James replied, removing a sealed envelope from the folder. David was most explicit that this section be read in the presence of all parties. March 27th. I quickly calculated in my head. Just 2 weeks before David died, during one of those private meetings I had not been privy to. Jennifer's expression flickered between confusion and the first hints of alarm. This can't be legal. David was heavily medicated then. He wasn't of sound mind. On the contrary, James countered smoothly. "We have video documentation of David's mental clarity at the time of signing, specifically because he anticipated this objection." He nodded to his assistant, who set up a laptop on the table. The screen showed David, painfully thin but sitting upright in his home office, looking directly into the camera. I, David Michael Holbrook, am making this addendum to my will with full mental capacity, understanding all legal implications of these changes. I have not been coerced or influenced in any way. Jennifer's face had lost all color. Her attorney leaned forward. We should review this privately before proceeding. David's instructions were explicit, James replied firmly. The addendum must be read in full before anyone leaves this room. He broke the seal on the envelope and removed several pages. Before I read this document, James said, David requested that a video message be played for all present. He nodded again to his assistant, who queued up another file. David's gaunt face filled the screen, his eyes sunken but clear and determined. If you're watching this, I'm gone, he began, and some uncomfortable truths need to be revealed. The room fell completely silent as David continued. 3 months ago, I discovered something that shattered the foundation of my marriage. My wife, Jennifer, has been engaged in a long-term affair with Ryan Mercer, beginning before our marriage and continuing throughout, even during my illness. Gasps filled the room. Jennifer half rose from her chair. This is slander. I never... Please continue the video, James instructed his assistant firmly. David's voice grew stronger as he spoke. I hired investigators who documented dozens of meetings between them while I was undergoing treatment. More disturbingly, I discovered systematic financial fraud. Jennifer has been transferring company funds to accounts she controls jointly with Mercer, planning for a future without me, long before my prognosis was terminal. Jennifer's parents were staring at her in shock. Her friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly uncertain which version of reality to believe. What hurt most, David continued, wasn't the affair or even the theft. It was realizing that the woman I married never loved me at all. I was simply a means to an end, access to the family wealth she coveted. David paused, took a sip of water, then looked directly into the camera again. But Jennifer underestimated 2 things: how much I loved my father and how much I learned from him about planning ahead. My heart constricted at these words, tears forming despite my best efforts to maintain composure. Dad, David said, seeming to look right at me through the screen, I'm so sorry for the pain Jennifer has undoubtedly caused you by now. I knew when I was gone, she would try to push you out, to take everything we built. I couldn't stop her from hurting you emotionally, but I could protect what matters. He smiled slightly, the same mischievous smile he had as a boy when he had a secret. Jennifer believes she knows the full extent of our family's holdings. She doesn't, not even close. Jennifer's expression transformed from defensive to confused. Holbrook Construction was just the visible part of our operations, David explained. The blue box in my office safe, which Dad hopefully now has, contains documentation of our true holdings, the offshore accounts, the international investments, the real estate held through shell companies. Assets I deliberately kept separate from anything bearing Jennifer's name. I hadn't been able to access the safe, but now I understood what David had been trying to tell me with his final coherent words. My true net worth, David continued calmly, is approximately $78 million, most of it unknown to Jennifer because it was structured through private trusts established years ago. Jennifer made a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a cry. One of her friends reached out to steady her as she swayed in her chair. Furthermore, David said, 3 days before making this video, I filed for divorce from Jennifer based on infidelity and financial fraud. The paperwork was processed expedited due to my terminal condition. While Jennifer remains legally my wife for public purposes, the divorce decree was granted and is included with this addendum. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Jennifer's attorney was frantically flipping through his papers, clearly blindsided by this information. According to our prenuptial agreement, which Jennifer signed, believing it only protected a few $1,000,000, infidelity and financial fraud are grounds for her to receive only the statutory minimum required by state law, approximately $400,000 total. Jennifer suddenly slumped in her chair, her eyes rolling back as she fainted. Her mother cried out, rushing to fan her face while her father called her name repeatedly. The video continued playing through the commotion. All remaining assets, including the full ownership of Holbrook Construction and all associated businesses, properties, and accounts, revert to my father, Samuel James Holbrook, to be managed or distributed as he sees fit. David's eyes softened as he delivered his final message. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything sooner. I needed to protect you, to make sure Jennifer couldn't manipulate the situation while I was vulnerable. The blue box contains everything you need: account numbers, passwords, contact information for all the financial managers. Most importantly, it contains letters I've written to you over the years but never sent. Things I should have said while I had the chance. Tears were flowing freely down my face now, mirrored on the faces of Marcus, Patricia, and Harold. Even James Wilson's professional demeanor had cracked, his eyes suspiciously bright as the video concluded. I love you, Dad. You were always my hero, even when I didn't show it enough. Make the company thrive, help people, and find happiness again. You deserve it more than anyone I've ever known. The screen went black, leaving a profound silence in the room, broken only by Jennifer's mother, attempting to revive her with gentle slaps to the face. James Wilson cleared his throat, regaining his professional composure. The legal documents supporting everything David mentioned are included in this addendum. They have been thoroughly reviewed and are legally binding. Jennifer had regained consciousness and was staring blankly ahead, the full magnitude of her failure sinking in. To summarize, James continued, the divorce decree significantly alters Mrs. Holbrook's standing. She is entitled to retain the house and the previously mentioned investment portfolio valued at $1.2 million. However, the ownership stake in Holbrook Properties is revoked based on the terms of the prenuptial agreement. All remaining assets revert to Samuel Holbrook, effective immediately. He turned to me directly. Mr. Holbrook, as soon as this meeting concludes, we should discuss immediate measures to secure company accounts and properties. David left specific instructions about priorities. I nodded, still processing the extraordinary turn of events. David had protected me after all, had somehow found the strength during his final weeks to ensure justice would prevail. Jennifer suddenly found her voice, shrill with panic. This can't be legal. He was dying. He wasn't thinking clearly. Graham, do something. Her attorney looked uncomfortable. Jennifer, if the divorce was properly filed and granted, I don't care what it takes, she hissed. Contest it. Claim duress. Whatever. He can't just leave me with only $1 million after everything. Her words hung in the air, revealing her true nature more clearly than any evidence could have. There was no mention of love, of loss, only fury at receiving only a sum most people would consider a fortune. In that moment, looking at the woman my son had married, I felt an odd sense of peace. David had seen the truth before the end. He had taken steps to protect what we had built together. Most importantly, he had left me with confirmation of what mattered most: his love and respect. As Jennifer continued her tirade, alternating between threats and sudden, desperate attempts to claim she was just upset, I sat quietly, David's final message replaying in my mind. You were always my hero. In the end, my son had become mine. In the chaos following Jennifer's collapse and the revelation of David's true will, James Wilson efficiently took control of the situation. I suggest we take a 15-minute recess, he announced. Mrs. Holbrook clearly needs a moment to compose herself, and there are several additional matters to address afterward. Jennifer was helped to a side office by her increasingly uncomfortable-looking parents. Her friends huddled in the hallway, whispering furiously among themselves, clearly reassessing their allegiance to her narrative. James guided me to his private office, where Marcus, Patricia, and Harold joined us. David was very thorough, he told me, pulling out a blue metal box from his safe. He brought this to me the day he signed the addendum. He wanted to ensure Jennifer couldn't intercept it. The box, The blue box David had mentioned with his dying breath sat on the desk between us. With shaking hands, I opened it to find neatly organized folders containing account information, property deeds, and business documents. Beneath these lay a stack of sealed envelopes, each labeled with a date, going back years. Personal letters, James explained. David wrote to you regularly, but felt you might find his sentiments too emotional. He saved them for when he thought you might need them most. I clutched the letters, these precious final connections to my son, as James continued explaining the immediate steps we needed to take. I've already prepared documents to restore your access to all accounts and properties. David instructed me to move quickly once the will was read. Did he know? I asked quietly. Did he know what Jennifer would do after he was gone? James nodded grimly. He suspected. When he discovered her affair and financial manipulations, he realized her true character. He was devastated but determined to protect you and the business. Marcus leaned forward. How did he discover the affair? David never said anything to me. He became suspicious when his wedding ring disappeared, James explained. Jennifer claimed to be having it cleaned, but David accidentally saw her give it to Mercer as some sort of twisted token of their relationship. After that, he hired investigators who uncovered everything else. Patricia squeezed my hand. He was protecting you even then, Sammy, not wanting to burden you with the truth while you were focused on his care. A knock at the door interrupted us. James's assistant entered with a concerned expression. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Holbrook is insisting on speaking with you, and Mr. Holbrook immediately. She's threatening legal action if you refuse. James sighed. I expected as much. Show her in, please. Jennifer entered alone, her initial shock replaced by cold calculation. This will be contested, she announced without preamble. David was not of sound mind. He was heavily medicated and influenced by his father. No court will uphold this ridiculous addendum. On the contrary, James replied calmly, we have extensive medical documentation certifying David's mental competence at the time of signing, along with video evidence. Furthermore, the divorce decree is final and properly executed. Your legal standing is extremely limited. I don't care what it takes, Jennifer snapped. I'll drag this through every court possible. I'll tell everyone how Sammy manipulated his dying son, how I wouldn't recommend that approach, came a new voice from the doorway. Frank Donovan stood there, holding a thick folder. Mrs. Holbrook, I'm the private investigator David hired. I have extensive documentation of your activities during his illness, the affair, the financial fraud, even conversations where you discussed how quickly you could get rid of the old man after David's death. Jennifer's face drained of color for the second time that day. You were spying on me? That's illegal. All surveillance was conducted legally, with proper authorization from David as the injured party, Frank replied evenly. Every hotel meeting with Ryan Mercer, every phone call about moving assets, every spa day while David was undergoing treatment. It's all documented and admissible. Jennifer's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal's. Ryan will support me. He'll testify that. Mr. Mercer has already been contacted by authorities regarding potential charges of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, James interrupted. Given his position at the bank, he's facing possible felony charges and professional disbarment. I wouldn't count on his loyalty. For a moment, Jennifer seemed genuinely lost, her carefully constructed plans collapsing around her. Then her expression hardened again. Fine, take the money, but the house is still legally mine, and I'll make sure you never set foot in it again. It was the first time I had spoken directly to her since entering the office. Jennifer, David told me something important before he died, something I didn't understand until now. She regarded me warily. He said you could keep the house if you had truly loved him. The condition was simple. You would need to allow me to live in the guest house. That's all. If you had shown that basic kindness, you would have kept everything. Jennifer's eyes widened in realization. The clause about the guest house rights. James nodded. David included a simple test of character in his plan. If you had honored his wish to let his father remain in the guest house, the more aggressive provisions of the will would never have been triggered. Your eviction of Sammy automatically activated the contingency plan. A test? Jennifer whispered. All of this because I wanted my own space after my husband died? No, I said quietly. All of this because you revealed who you truly are. Someone who never loved David at all. A complex series of emotions crossed Jennifer's face. Anger, calculation, then suddenly an attempt at tearful contrition. Sammy, I was grief-stricken, not thinking clearly. We can work this out. For David's sake. Don't, I interrupted, surprising myself with my calm certainty. Don't use my son's name to manipulate me. It's over, Jennifer. The door opened again, and a police officer entered with James's assistant. Mrs. Holbrook? The officer asked. I need to ask you some questions regarding suspicious financial transactions from Holbrook construction accounts. Jennifer's face contorted with rage. You called the police? After everything I've been through? David did, James corrected. He filed the complaint before his death, to be processed after the will reading. The evidence is quite compelling. Systematic fraud exceeding $2 million. As the officer began reading Jennifer her rights, her parents appeared in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and shock. Mom! Dad! Do something! Jennifer demanded. Mr. Taylor stepped forward, looking years older than he had just hours ago. Jennifer, enough. We've stood by you, believed in you, but this. He gestured helplessly at the scene before him. What you did to David, to Sammy. We raised you better than this. You're taking his side? Jennifer's voice rose hysterically. After everything I told you about him, we should have questioned why your stories about Sammy never matched the man we met, Mrs. Taylor said quietly. We wanted to believe our daughter. That was our mistake. As Jennifer was escorted from the room, still hurling threats and accusations, a tall man appeared briefly in the doorway. Ryan Mercer, I presumed, coming to see what had become of their plans. Seeing the police, he vanished as quickly as he had appeared. In the sudden quiet that followed Jennifer's departure, James turned to me with a sympathetic expression. There will be legal proceedings, but David's documentation is thorough. Jennifer will likely face charges for the financial fraud at minimum. I don't want to press additional charges, I said, surprising everyone. The financial ones are enough. David wouldn't want a prolonged legal battle. Are you sure? Marcus asked incredulously. After everything she did? I looked down at the blue box containing David's letters. My son spent his final weeks ensuring justice would be done, but not seeking vengeance. I want to honor that distinction. As we prepared to leave, Jennifer's father approached me awkwardly. Sammy, we had no idea. The things she told us about you. You believed your daughter, I said simply. I understand. I would have done the same for David. Still, we should have seen through it, he replied, genuine remorse in his voice. If there's ever anything we can do. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. The anger I had expected to feel toward Jennifer's parents wasn't there. Only sadness for what all of us had lost through her deceptions. Back in James's office, we reviewed the immediate steps needed to secure the company and assets. David was very specific about how he wanted things handled, James explained, showing me a detailed plan my son had created. As I read through David's instructions, I felt a bittersweet pride. Even facing death, my son had thought of everything, had protected not just me, but all the employees who depended on Holbrook Construction. In his final act, he had revealed himself to be not just my son, but my legacy, the best parts of me carried forward and improved upon. Later that evening, when the immediate legal matters had been addressed, I sat alone in Harold's guest room, finally opening the first of David's letters. Dad, it began, there are things I should say to you more often, starting with thank you. The tears came again, but this time they weren't entirely from grief. My son had known me, had loved me, had protected me when I thought I was protecting him. In the midst of unimaginable loss, that knowledge was a gift beyond measure. Returning to the family home, a week after the will reading, felt surreal. Jennifer had moved out immediately after her arrest, leaving behind most of the furnishings, but taking anything of significant value that wasn't specifically inventoried in the legal documents. The house felt hollow, echoing with memories, but stripped of warmth. David's room remained untouched, exactly as he had left it. I stood in the doorway for a long time before finally entering, running my fingers over his books, his college trophies, the framed photo of the three of us, David, Marie, and me, taken on his high school graduation day. "I miss you both so much," I whispered to the empty room. The practical tasks of reclaiming my life provided structure during those first difficult weeks. Marcus and I worked to stabilize the company, reassuring employees and clients that Holbrook Construction would continue stronger than ever. The rumors Jennifer had spread required careful countermeasures, not angry denials, but quiet, consistent demonstration of the truth through actions rather than words. David's detailed plans in the blue box included something that initially surprised me: instructions for establishing the David Holbrook Foundation for Cancer Research, funded with a substantial portion of the assets. "Dad," he had written, "use the money to help ensure other families don't experience what ours did, twice." Creating the foundation gave me purpose beyond grief. I worked closely with leading medical researchers, focusing particularly on the aggressive form of brain cancer that had taken both my wife and son. The foundation also established a support program for families of patients, providing practical assistance during treatment and bereavement. The guest house where I had lived became a temporary home for families traveling for specialized cancer treatment, offering comfortable accommodation at no cost. Transforming spaces of personal loss into sources of comfort for others became a theme in my healing journey. Holbrook Construction expanded its long-standing policy of hiring veterans to include cancer survivors, creating flexible positions that accommodated ongoing treatment or physical limitations. "Building more than structures" became our new company motto, reflecting David's vision of business as a force for community good. Harold and Patricia became constant presences in my life, stopping by for coffee or bringing meals long after such support was practically necessary. Their friendship helped fill the void left by those who had abandoned me during Jennifer's campaign of lies. Slowly, some former friends returned, offering awkward apologies for their doubts. I accepted them without resentment. People make mistakes, especially when manipulated by someone as calculating as Jennifer had been. Marcus proved himself not just a business partner, but a true friend, stepping up to handle operations whenever the grief became overwhelming. "David was like a nephew to me," he said simply. "Taking care of his father and his company is the least I can do." Occasionally, news about Jennifer filtered back to me. She had accepted a plea deal on the fraud charges, receiving probation and community service rather than jail time. Her relationship with Ryan Mercer had ended almost immediately after her assets were frozen. She had moved to another state, apparently trying to rebuild her life away from the community where her reputation was irreparably damaged. Despite everything she had done, I found I couldn't hate Jennifer. The energy required for sustained hatred was better directed toward healing and building something positive from the ashes of loss. When Patricia expressed surprise at my lack of bitterness, I explained, "Hating Jennifer won't bring David back. It would only ensure she continues to take something from me." Reading David's letters became a nightly ritual, each one revealing new facets of my son's thoughts and feelings over the years. Some made me laugh out loud at memories of family vacations or job site mishaps. Others brought tears as he expressed gratitude for sacrifices I had made or wisdom I had shared. Through his words, our relationship continued to grow and evolve even after his death. 6 months after the will reading, I visited David's grave with news of the Foundation's first research breakthrough, a promising new approach to treatment that had shown remarkable results in preliminary trials. The lead scientist says it could eventually increase survival rates by 30%, I told him, placing fresh flowers beside his headstone. "You're still helping people, son." As seasons changed, I found myself emerging from the darkest period of grief into something resembling a new normal. The pain didn't diminish. I simply grew larger around it, developing new facets to my life while carrying the love for Marie and David with me always. The experience transformed my understanding of what truly matters. Material success means little compared to authentic relationships. Character reveals itself not during easy times, but when faced with adversity. Love expressed imperfectly, but genuinely outweighs any performance of affection motivated by self-interest. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that family extends beyond blood relations. Harold, who had started as a neighbor, but become like a brother. Patricia, carrying Marie's memory forward through her unwavering support. Marcus, whose loyalty never wavered even when it might have been professionally advantageous. These people became my chosen family. Proof that connections formed through genuine care can be as strong as any biological bond. 3 years after David's death, the foundation helped fund a specialized treatment center at the local hospital. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, several families approached me with stories of how our support programs had helped them through their darkest hours. One young mother with tears in her eyes told me, "Your son's legacy gave my daughter a fighting chance." In that moment, I felt David's presence more strongly than I had since his passing. Grief, I have come to understand, is not a journey with a destination, but a companion that walks beside us, sometimes pressing close, other times giving us space to breathe. The weight doesn't disappear, but we develop strength to carry it. The love that causes such pain and loss is the same love that ultimately heals us. David's final gift to me wasn't just financial security or justice regarding Jennifer. It was the certainty that our bond as father and son had transcended the misunderstandings and unspoken words that sometimes stood between us in life. In protecting me, even as he faced his own mortality, David demonstrated a love that continues to guide and sustain me. To those of you watching who may be facing your own losses or betrayals, I offer this hard-won wisdom. The human spirit is remarkably resilient. When it seems darkness has permanently descended, look for the pinpricks of light, the friend who sits with you in silence, the memory that brings unexpected laughter, the opportunity to transform pain into purpose by helping others. Trust your instincts about people's character, but don't let past betrayals close your heart to new connections. Jennifer's deception was painful, but it also highlighted the genuine loyalty of those who stood by me. Without the darkness, I might never have fully appreciated their light. Most importantly, express your love to those who matter while you can. David's letters are precious beyond measure, but how much more wonderful it would have been to hear those words directly from him. Don't wait for perfect moments or perfect words. Love expressed imperfectly still nourishes the soul. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected blessings or growth? Share your story in the comments below. If this account of my journey through loss and renewal has touched you, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of resilience and transformation. Like this video if you believe in the power of love to transcend even death, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's not the absence of storms that defines us, but how we learn to dance in the rain.